big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm big boy, done.
All right, John, episode 5. So this is our we did a 5-episode pilot before we start to get into more focused stuff. How's your weekend? What's up? We just did Labor Day this weekend.
Yeah, that's right, man. It's been good. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're at the lake every night. We've been fishing. We made some friends and on the baseball team, the coach on the baseball team was like, "Man, I see fishing rods in the back of your truck." And
yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, they're always there." And he's like, I want to get my son into fishing. He's been asking. I was like, "Come on with it. Like, come jump in with us." And he just texted me and said, "When can we go?" And we're like, "We're going tonight." He's like, "I'm on my way."
Nice.
So yeah, it's cool because like I always throw that invitation out there. Most of the time, people don't take up on it, and it's been cool. It's been a good just connection, man. His son and my son, they get along, and he's an interesting dude. He's fun to be around. It's been good. Yeah,
fishing's awesome. It can be a one-handed sport, so you can have a food or a beverage in one hand, but it's also it can be social. But at the same time, I like it, like skateboarding was for me. Skateboarding brought a community, but it also allowed me to have my time, where I could do it. The skateboard didn't care what was going on in my life. It was always going to be there. The fishing rod's always going to be there, right?
Yes, sir.
I love it. Yeah, it might be a tough ask to get someone to go fishing this time of year in Texas. It's hot.
Yeah, mostly in the evening. Yeah, we got a spot I was telling you about earlier, but we got this spot on the end of a marina. It's called the Fishing Well, and there's this shed that sits on the end of the marina where boats come in and park and launch from. And in that shed, you go inside of it, and there's windows and a big fan, like an attic fan that keeps air moving in there.
Yeah.
And then underneath the docks of it, there's these green lights, and it attracts fish, and you can sit inside of there and just drop a line down. So it's pretty passive fishing. So it's so much more about just the experience and the hang and being together. And then
don't blow up the spot. I mean, don't let everybody know your spot. You got to protect that with your life.
Yes, sir.
No, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I want to get into the algorithm, what the algorithm is showing me. Before I get to that, I did get a question from. I had a couple people listen to the pilot episodes, and I had a question because in episode 2, we looked at a study from Penn State, and it had a shocking realization at just a statistical point where we learned that parents who didn't use humor, their adult children. Only 2.9% of their adult children reported having a good relationship with their parents. It was much higher. It was in the 70s for adult children of parents who did use humor. Somebody asked me why, and at first I was like, "Oh, what? That's something I really care about. That why? Because it's something I've really focused on. My minor in college was in child development and those sorts of things. So I was kind of psychology adjacent. But why? The real why is empathy, or a broken empathy. It takes empathy and an empathic nerve to understand humor, and even if you're not a funny person, but to find things funny that most people find funny, you need to have that empathic nerve and be connected to people. Similar to pain. One thing I've often told people is all laughter comes from pain. And to be clear about pain, it's not just physical or emotional pain. It can be just simple discomfort, like when the light isn't green when you want it to be. That's a type of pain. Or someone kind of telling an awkward joke is pain, So there's humor within that. So pain and humor, they're the same, they're opposite sides of the same coin. And they both require you to understand, they're both necessary for you to be able to connect with other humans. The other part of that, if I go from a coin to a 3-legged stool, is understanding appreciation of music and art also takes that. And so my bet is I would bet households where parents don't use humor, they probably don't listen to much music either, because they go hand in hand. To have that empathic nerve is to understand humor, is to understand and appreciate music and art. And so that's kind of how I would answer that question. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart, because when I go to meet people, I've said before, I have ADHD, And one thing that people with ADHD know, if they're working with their therapist and reading and kind of trying to manage life in a safe, normal world like we have, is we have to watch out for narcissists if you have ADHD, because we are just oil and water. We do not connect, because if you have ADHD, you have a strong, you really react to injustice, and a narcissist doesn't understand justice is not a thing. And so I try to sniff people out, mainly because I want to make a strong connection with them. And so whenever I'm meeting new people, like, my small talk is always about, what are you listening to music wise? What movies are you digging? What books are you reading? And if someone can't sink into that and doesn't have some kind of connection to those things, it's very hard for me to connect with them. And I think that could be part of it. People who have had a narcissistic parent might understand that as well. But that's my take. Thoughts, John?
Yeah, my thoughts. I mean, I love hearing your take, because you bring that science piece to this that I just, it's intriguing, and it's cool to hear, because for me, I shared on that episode that, humor was a big thing between me and my parents. And, my dad and I have a very similar sense of humor. And I think that we've found a way to connect that way. So, as you're talking, and as a parent, I think what it kind of comes down to is, how do you connect with your kids? And this is just such a great way just to understand, have that connection where you understand each other, and you're connecting with them. And it makes me wonder, for people who struggle with this, that, okay, well then how do you connect on a level with your kids where it's easy, there's freedom there, it's not rigid, and how do you do that? So for me, it just comes down to the importance of connecting with my children. And so, and humor is a great way to break that ice. And for me, I've had an appreciation for Conan O'Brien's sense of humor, where he just makes fun of everything he does and the programming that they do. And it's he doesn't take himself seriously, and he beats everybody to the punch with his own joke, so he can laugh at himself. And I love that about him. So that's
confidence. That's pure confidence. When you can laugh at yourself, that's confidence.
And when you have teenage kids, you become you say the joke, and they look at you and they're like, Dad, just stop, quit now, stop now. You're not. And so I intentionally try to get them to say that. So now that's just becoming a way for me to connect and get them to laugh, especially around their friends.
You're a menace, Dad.
Yeah. Always.
No, I love it. Yeah, humor is great. Important part of for me raising a family. My kids' humor, that it's fun to watch them develop their own humor as they're now adults, and so it's been fun. But I think that's key. So empathy. So take a look internally, man. Do you how are you connecting with other humans? And if you struggle with that, I don't know how a narcissist deals with becoming a better human. I don't know what it looks like. It's way beyond me. But I know I have to watch myself around them.
Yeah, I think that there's just probably quite a bit of loneliness there.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine. I don't know. I think loneliness requires empathy too. I think we're speaking outside of our pay grade here, but I think if you're there's probably spectrums of narcissism, but a really, really intense narcissist probably doesn't feel lonely like someone with a high empathic connection to other humans be my guess. But all right, well let's shift gears.
All right, let's do it.
So last week, Oasis said they're hitting the road. When you heard that, what was your first thought?
Well, they're still doing something. I mean,
they haven't played a show in 15 years.
Man.
So
classic songs. I mean, I saw a meme or a video of a dog strumming a guitar and
with his tail.
And it was Wonderwall.
Yeah. No, that was the if you were anywhere near a guitar, if you had a guitar in your house, you learned how to play the main riff in Wonderwall in the mid-90s. It was just that was the just, I don't know what it would have been before that. You probably did like Smoke on the Water in the 70s and in the 80s. I'm not sure what you played.
Anything GC&D.
It was
GC&D.
Wonderwall. Yeah, it was Wonderwall for the younger Xers. 1995, that album comes out. What's the Story? Morning Glory. Apparently, they had a bit of a run in Britain before that. Britpop. We'll talk about a few Britpop bands. But yeah, my first thought when Oasis said they're gonna do some shows is, dudes are out of money. The money's dried up, with the shift to streaming and stuff like that. I'm sure some of those bands, the mail money coming in is probably less. So they need some money. There's a lot more money to be had in live shows. There's got to be, given how much tickets cost nowadays. But yeah, that was my first thought. They're out of money. Then I listened to the album again this week. I went back and gave What's the Story? Morning Glory a little bit of a spin.
What's your take on it after listening through that?
I would say it's fine. It's fine. It's the same album it always was. It's just fine. It wasn't like, the album as a whole is not great. Okay. So if you're, it came out in 95, my senior year of high school. It was all over the place. The Wonderwall was the big hit, and then Champagne Supernova, probably 3-4 singles off there that all kind of blew up on radio, depending on what part of the world or country you're in. Here in the U.S.,
got plenty
on the West Coast, it blew up. But the album as a whole, it's just fine. The rest of the songs on there, they're fine. I listened to it. It's just, it's. But I think the real telltale, which we used to have, we don't have this as much, or at least I don't go to the record stores anymore, but you remember a lot of the record stores had a used section. And some record stores, that was their main, like most of their space was dedicated to use. So with CDs, that was great because CDs don't wear out like a record or a tape. Right. And kind of later in the 90s, get 96, 97, 98, if you went into the used record store and were just looking for CDs, because it was still kind of how you got your music, you'd go to some of these sections and there'd be like way too many of an album. And this was one of them. It was kind of like one where you'd giggle. You'd go, oh yeah, Oasis, they had some hits. Yeah. There's like 20 used ones here. People have traded those in, and like probably at the point where a given record store won't even take them anymore. Right, so they had their moment. It was good. I don't know what they can do to make something new. And I think part of it is because they're just, at least with that album, I feel like they were trying to mimic something else. I didn't believe them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How'd you take it?
I mean, well, at least the image, it was like this new kind of Beatles, like they were spinning off that look. And so, I think they were just trying to steal some of that. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, when I think of what that show now must be like, it's all the people back from 95, like going back to the nostalgia of the, like, maybe didn't get to see the concert, or like, have that connection way back when, and those memories back in high school to go to that show. Yeah. So like, man, I think that would be good people watching.
Have you gone to a show for a band, group, artist who was, big when you were in high school, college, and in recent years as an adult, you go and you're hoping to see some of their older stuff? Have you done that?
Man, I want to say yes right off the bat. Yeah. Nothing's coming immediately to my mind, but I'm sure it'll come to me. But what have you?
A couple. My wife and I saw the Counting Crows, I want to say 10 years ago. So after their prime. I mean, August and everything after Desert Island Disc for me, like one of my top 5. If I'm going on a road trip, I almost always run that album at least one time. It just hit me at a perfect time in life. I think, middle of high school, maybe freshman, sophomore, junior year, somewhere in there. And it is front to back a great album. What's funny is I tell people Mr. Jones is the worst song on that album. And that was the biggest single. And they killed it. They played at the Austin Music Hall, rest in peace.
Nice.
And so terrible sounding venue, but pretty cool. And there was a bunch of middle-aged people in there enjoying Counting Crows. And then I saw, I've seen Ed Kowalczyk 3 different times, partly because I was working with Ed Kowalczyk in a couple of organizations. Ed Kowalczyk, if you know, live, lightning crashes, that sort of thing. So, and he's still got it, man. Dude's got pipes. And can wail. And in the same organization, I was also working with Glenn Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Sweet.
So I haven't been to like a real concert with Glenn, but he can still throw down.
Lives, they're on tour right now. I was I am friends with the guitarist right now, the current guitarist. I worked with him at Starbucks, and the current Stone Temple Pilots is opening for them right now. So like, I
don't even want to know about that. That's Weiland. Without Weiland, how's that work?
I don't know. I've just caught clips from. I follow a couple of the dudes that are in the band, around the band, making content for the band, and so I caught clips of it. It dawned on me. I got tickets to a '90s like hip hop reunion show in honor of Coolio when Coolio passed away. And it was at a small venue in Cedar Park, Leander, Texas.
My wife was at that show.
Oh, yeah. I saw her. Her.
Vanilla Ice.
Vanilla Ice headline.
Yeah.
So, so I think that might be this, tour that they're currently doing with, like what we're talking about, going back and everybody's just singing the song together because it's like, we're here, they're doing it, we're finally getting to see it. Or so it was an interesting show because these one hit wonder hip hop opening, there was like 6 opening acts, and they were 2-song sets singing their 2 hits, and they just kept milling through. And when Vanilla Ice got up there, I just wonder, since when did that come out? 80s, late 80s?
I want to say
early
89,
90s,
89.
How many times he's performed Ice Ice Baby, thousands of times when everybody's just singing along,
1990.
1990.
Yeah.
So, I will say I fell right in line. Like, I was rapping along. Like, he invited some people up on the stage.
Yeah, he knows where I think he knows where his bread's buttered.
The Ninja Turtles were there when he did Go Ninja. They came out on the stage.
Jeez.
And they were dancing around. The Ninja Turtles were in the house, and so he put a little bit of
that's great.
A metal edge to some of his songs. So
I know he tried to do some metal, tried to do some hardcore at one point. That's cool. But back over to Oasis and Britpop. Did you get into Britpop? Oasis was most Americans' kind of first taste of Britpop. There's the other band, Blur.
Mm-hmm.
And
Blur had 1 or 2 songs that I would sing along with on the radio. I don't know if I would say I got into them,
Yeah.
I don't know how into Britpop I got, really, because I was coming out of grunge and 90s rap and hip hop, and so I would put that that Britpop kind of in that same category as like Matchbox 20 and like Three Doors Down. They fit in my kind of
I'd say
what
Oasis.
I call playlist. It was Oasis kind of fit in there.
Bar bands, really good bar bands.
Yeah, background music that people are familiar with and it's comfortable. Yeah, so
there is good Britpop. And I think Oasis, similar. We talked some episodes ago about Mumford and Sons, where they took a genre, this folky kind of retro, multi-layered, musician-heavy, dynamic music that you were getting from the Decemberists, Fleet Foxes, those bands that weren't as popular. They tidied it up and, dare I say, watered it down a little bit and made it more palatable to the everyman. I think Oasis did that with Britpop. When I look at some of there's 2 bands I was really into. One I was really into, who had an album. This is one of my Desert Island Discs top 10 all time. Ned's Atomic Dustbin. The album is called God Fodder, Fodder. And that was 91. and also along in that era was Stone Roses, and I think it probably for me, having already listened to a lot of the Smiths, Morrissey, The Cure, Depeche Mode, it was kind of a natural flow for me, which is why I probably didn't get into Oasis, because I think it departed too much. It was like a watered down version. And same with like your what's the band that we made fun of because they sounded like Radiohead when they first came out? That song Yellow. What was that band?
Oh, Coldplay.
Like Coldplay was like, that was, they killed Britpop in my opinion. They watered it down even farther than Oasis, and it became something else. But Ned's Atomic Dustbin, a must listen. The album is Godfather. This band has 2 bass players, and they play. One plays a more traditional bass line, and one plays harmonies off that. And so you have this really, it's a really cool sound, and it has the power pop, kind of fuzzy guitar, and pretty dynamic. And it's, I think for me, when someone says Britpop, I go to Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and I love that album. Oasis, I didn't get too much into it, but Blur, I think has obviously had a better career than Oasis. They eventually became the Gorillaz, because Blur and the Gorillaz is David Albarn, who is a global treasure. So he's a global treasure. If you ever, I've seen Gorillaz live twice. Blur just put out an album last year as Blur, not a Gorillaz album, and it's fantastic. But if you ever get a chance to see David Albarn, no matter what he's doing, go. He is one of the best performers live I've ever seen, ever. He is just, he's locked in. He knows what he's doing. He reads the room, and he's just really good. It's just one of the most creative humans ever, David Albarn. So,
I forget that the Gorillaz were connected to Blur, and I relate so much more to the Gorillaz than I did Blur. There were a couple of songs by Blur that got the radio play, and I heard those, but I never went and like got the albums, got into them. But I did with the Gorillaz.
And that album that song 2 is on, the one single, which is, if you know the history, it was kind of a joke. It's like, we need I think that the label or producer was like, we need something for the Americans, basically. And the song doesn't mean anything, not saying anything. Yeah. It just like, fine. Like, because
that song.
Yeah. Because that was happening, it was like, we need something more. Because the rest of the album is a lot more, you can see where the Gorillaz come from. If you listen to all the other Blur stuff, it makes more sense. But if it's all you ever heard was song 2, you really didn't hear Blur, because they didn't even want to make that song. So interesting. So Britpop, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, check it out.
Sweet.
Sick. All right. John, sports parents, you're in the thick of it. Remind us your kids' ages again.
Yeah, so I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old.
Bless you.
So we got high school represented, middle school represented, and elementary, all in one roof, in one house.
And I have a soon to be 22-year-old and a soon to be 20-year-old. We did the sports stuff. So what I want to do is kind of talk through the phases of sports parenting, and just kind of riff on some of the things that are funny about it, some of the things that suck. For those who don't know me, I have a company that works in the sports space, specifically the high school to college pipeline, recruiting, analytics, those sorts of things, plus college sports. So I've lived this at the highest levels. And so I have some things to say to future sports parents, current sports parents, and just some advice. But we also want to get a real world take from John, who's up to his neck in sports parenting right now. So the phases I want to talk through are the little cubbies. They're little kids. They're really, anybody can do it. You're playing the soccer, the baseball, whatever. Yeah. Then there's rec league, where it starts to maybe get a little competitive. Skills start to matter a little bit more. And then you get into competitive. So maybe a competitive rec league, or you're playing for your middle school or your high school. And it starts to matter more. You're playing for something. And then, that travel, that last level, which is travel sports and beyond. I'd love to kind of riff on that kind of stuff and share some advice. But the little cubbies, John, what's your involvement been with that? Have you done the coaching? You know, what's your role when you're around that?
The little Cubbies has been it's been a huge part of my parenting experience. It's
Yeah.
taken so much time and effort and money. All four of our kids have participated in soccer, basketball, football,
Yeah.
baseball, and covering all the seasons of kind of the major sports. And so on my level, I've jumped into being volunteer head coach to volunteer assistant coach, and just fully involved, all in. And it's been a wild experience. And I would say I've evolved, you could say, as a dad through this experience. And I mean, it's been a wild journey.
How involved were your parents in your sports as a kid?
So I'm the youngest of four. And so growing up, I would say that I was kind of, I wouldn't, the afterthought, like where my older siblings, my parents had most of their expenditure of their time and their money. And
They're
so
run out of gas.
Yeah. And so my involvement with them, when I look back, my mom didn't, I mean, she would attend the things here and there. My dad coached my brother's, rec league basketball team. But my dad's involvement has really been like the front yard and the driveway. With a lot of driveway basketball, a lot of front yard, like wiffle ball, home run derby, or just standing outside throwing the football or getting a glove and just tossing the baseball. So I would say, looking at my sports journey, I got involved in high school and a year of college lacrosse. And so my parents, I can think of games, they didn't travel. So when we had away games, kind of rarely did they attend. And then at the home games, they were at the majority of the home games.
Yeah.
So I would say involved enough where when I look back, I'm not like, man,
they were there. You remember them being there. Yeah. They cared.
I remember them being there.
I had a different experience. I'm not going to lie. I'm the youngest of 9. So you can imagine how out of gas my parents were. It also made them much older too. So my mom, just real talk here. I bless my parents. I'm happy with where my life ended up and where I am and what's going on. But I did have, I was the typical Gen X kid, feral. My mom never once saw me play a sport. My dad did the best he could. And showed up to a few things, a track meet here or there, a basketball game here or there, a baseball game here or there. But for the most part, I was on my own. And even to the point where I had to ride my bike. You're talking, so baseball in '86, I'm second grade, I think. I had to ride my bike to practice with my bat and my mitt, ride my bike to the games by myself.
Wow.
And just get myself there. It was a completely different reality than what we did. And so, but the one time, and this is a core memory, just burned into my brain about my mom's, the first time, the one and only time my mom showed up to a sports thing was, I believe it was the awards, end of season awards for cross country. Wow. And my parents at the time were into square dancing.
That's
like
awesome.
Okay. Like way into it. Like they had the costume. Okay. My mom, they had a square dance thing right after the awards thing. And so they rock up to cross country end of season awards in their square dancing outfits. Okay.
What is a typical square dancing outfit? What does that look like?
Think Lawrence Welk. Okay. They look like they were going to go be on the Lawrence Welk show. So my mom's got like this gingham, giant gingham red puffy skirt, like insane puffy skirt. You got to remember, my mom's fat, right? So you got this little fat lady with this puffy skirt. It's ridiculous, And then my dad is wearing, kind of like he's got the gingham shirt and the neckerchief kind of off to the side.
Okay.
Wow. And my dad, was famous for the one times that he would make an appearance because he's picking me up or dropping me off. He was always in a suit. And this is the first time any of my friend, and they used to joke my dad was in the mafia because he always had a suit on. And first time they saw him not in a suit. So the only time my friends at school ever saw my mother was she was dressed up to go be on Lawrence Welk or something. It was embarrassing. But question, back to your, how do you decide what sports you're going to chuck your kids into? Because, at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they can't make decisions. Mm-hmm. How'd you guys decide what to throw them into?
I think it started with just having in the garage a couple of bins that had, these random, just baseball, football, basketball, soccer ball, tennis ball, just frisbee. And then, you and I, we were neighbors pretty much. You were 4 houses down, and across the street from us, we had a cul-de-sac. So I would say for me, whichever one they generally took an interest in, and it made it easy because, the YMCA email would go out. We were members at the YMCA and be like, hey, sign up. We got kids soccer coming out. I'd be like, hey, do you want to play soccer? Yeah. So I think it was, I didn't want to, for me, experience is important, especially introducing my kids to something. We were just talking about fishing. If like that dude who came with us, I really just wanted it to be a good experience for his son. Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's make sure we got snacks. Let's make sure I even had a little Bluetooth speaker, and I plugged my phone next to it where I streamed, the college football kickoff. We weren't even really watching it, just to kind of set the tone. So that way the goal is, man, did you have fun and do you want to do it again? And, so as a parent, was my goal early on in this early Cubbies phase was, did you have fun and do you want to do it again? And so making that decision, I think, was fairly easy because they were also influenced by the kids in the neighborhood that would inevitably just gather up, and then, a soccer brawl would start up or, whatever they were grabbing, and whatever season it was. I don't feel like at that early age I had to do much pushing them into anything.
Yeah. So you just created an environment where they could try stuff. And then if the opportunity came up, you'd get involved. Did you do some coaching? Did you coach a Cubbies team?
Yes.
What sport?
I did. Football, basketball, and soccer.
Yeah. Which one was the hardest?
Football.
Yeah. Why is that?
Yeah. I think, this is, I don't know how much into the conversation at some point we'll get into this, but like for me as a parent at that point, I was very focused on performance, like the fundamentals, dialing in the skills, correcting them, really wanting them to adopt this passion for the grind,
Yeah.
And so
is that because you cared most about football versus soccer and basketball, or you knew the most about it?
Yeah, but I think if I was being honest, and I would say I might know more about basketball. It's kind of maybe between football and basketball, it's about even. Maybe if I'm being really honest, it was because I never played on a competitive level.
Yeah. Oh, so you felt you kind of had a little bit of a redemption energy,
vicarious living of, I'm
something to watch out for.
That is part of what I feel like I've learned through this.
No, I think that's key. I coached the soccer, the little kids soccer, both my kids kind of in that 4 to 6 range several times. And like you said, you're dead on. Just make it fun. Make it fun. Winning is fun, but you got to teach the kids that to get little wins within the game, that sort of thing, and just have fun.
And at that age, it's like if you've ever seen those Looney Tunes cartoons where it's like the dust cloud and you'll see a leg and you'll see an arm, and then all of a sudden the ball will just kind of pop out,
squirt out,
and then that dust ball would go find it again. And it was easy to coach because it would be like, okay, we're going that way and you guys are going that way. And, just let them get after it. So, the soccer was pretty straightforward. You can't get into too much of the strategy or
that's awesome.
Gameplay.
And I think I enjoyed that because I didn't know anything about soccer. I know jack about soccer. And so
Same.
yeah, I could see the other coaches, in the Cubbies league we play against, you could tell they knew soccer.
Yeah.
And, my team seemed to roll because we weren't playing soccer, quality soccer. We were just out there having fun.
Hustling,
And
having
I was
fun
like,
too.
hey, let's just go fast. That's all I
Yeah,
ever told my
yeah,
kids. Let's just be
right.
fast. And it
Yep.
always seemed to work.
Mhm.
And so that was fun. But yeah. Any hilarious parents that you encountered at that age, or
Oh,
just
man.
like kind of, I don't know, asshole parents?
Yeah. Yes. And again, if I would be honest, if I was at times that parent, which
Oh,
it's embarrassing, bro. Like it's crazy. But I'll use myself as an example. We were doing this football out. We had this sports complex close to where we lived, which the sports fields were right there, and I was coaching the football. And I felt like I needed to prove my son for him to be able to prove himself. I was like pushing him to prove himself. And he's our second son. And so there's a dynamic there. Our
right.
second son played up all the time. So in one
Out of
hand,
necessity or convenience, or because he was good?
Necessity and convenience. Because
Yeah.
like if I could get them on the same team, that's just, we're getting to the practices, we're getting to the games.
Yeah, you're cutting all that stuff in half.
I think there's a part of it that kind of jacked him up. I think
Yeah.
I put him in a space where it defeated him a bit. It made him feel like he wasn't quite fast enough, wasn't quite strong enough, wasn't quite there. And I thought I was doing him like a favor by, okay, if you're playing up, it's only going to make you better. It's only going to make you stronger. And it's because I had to play up in terms of, talking to you about my dad playing in the front yard or in the driveway. My brother was almost 4 years older than me. And I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5", and so just so much taller and bigger than me.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I could justify that. So anyways, I'm out there at the field, and there's this play, and the play's over. The play is over. The players are walking back to their sides, back to the huddle. And as my son's walking back to the huddle, one of the players just on the other team comes running up and just jacks him from behind. Dirty shot. He didn't see it coming, and it just laid him out.
Oh, that's tough.
Well, the refs didn't even throw a flag. They didn't even do anything.
As soon as the game's over, they split. They don't want it. They're out.
Yeah, exactly. And this was an intense part of the game. And so I just, I didn't. My dad was actually there watching, his grandson play, community league football. And I go running over at the ref, and the ref kicks me. There's a tent in the middle of all the fields, and he's like, you got to go to the tent of shame, like where you can't coach, you can't even talk to the players. I'm standing there in that tent. My dad comes up to me after the game. He's like, okay. What was that? So yeah, I've had some moments like that, man. And it's
your kids.
I've learned
your
a
kids.
lot.
It's your kids. There's a lot of emotion there. It's tough. I get it. No, I fortunately in the soccer and a little bit of Cubby basketball that the kids didn't see any wild parents, didn't see anything totally out of control. I think we survived that. But moving on, so you get to this point where maybe your kid is showing specific interests or specific skills or specific traits of athleticism, and you start to steer them in a different direction, or you start to narrow what they're focused on. And for both my kids, that became basketball. I think everybody should play soccer for at the little Cubby level, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6, 7. It's the easiest sport to play because it's if you can move around your feet and kind of kick a ball, you can be on the team and contribute. I think it's a little goofy, like trying to get kids to play organized, baseball, volleyball, things like the skill. There's so many skills involved. It's like it's hilarious when I would drive by t-ball practice, and there'd be as many parents on the field as athletes trying to make a t-ball game happen, because it's just so there's so many fine skills that need to come together for it to be anything. Nothing wrong. I mean,
sure.
But so we never tried that. We never tried that. And I think football is probably in that realm too. There's just so many skills, and the plays are so complicated. It's got to be. It's tough at that age. So moving on, getting to rec league for us, that was basketball. I played in college. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'5" or 6'6" or something. I don't know anymore. Loved basketball. I tried not to influence my kids too much. Actually, the only thing I tried to influence them on was skateboarding. I tried to get them skateboarding. Neither of them really took to it. But basketball, they seem to get into it. Later on in life, my son told me, I really wanted to play more soccer. And Steele, sorry about that, man. I didn't know you didn't. I did. In middle school, you weren't telling me you wanted to play soccer. Anyway, they both played a rec league basketball. They kind of got to that level, and this is where this is kind of my advice: find an organized league that is. I think once you start to get to this level where there's a little bit of competition, whatever the sport is. If the league kind of does a league-wide kind of draft or distributes the kids evenly, if it's a league where a coach or parents can kind of put a team together, it gets ugly. It's bad scene. So you find those leagues, and I'm not putting brand names out there. I know with YMCA type things that can be the case. With soccer, kind of your AYSO or those different things. Find a league where they're centrally controlling what the teams are. And even in those, I've seen situations where there's like a dude who's been involved in that league. He's put 5 kids through it, and he's able to manipulate and game it a little bit to kind of create a super team. And that gets, I've seen that. But man, at that level, when you're going beyond just little cubby fun and you want to get it to see if your kid enjoys competition, you want equity in the competition. So look at leagues where the league is making the teams and teams aren't showing up or to be able to manipulate and kind of stack their team, because that's not fun. If you don't have that network, you don't have the people, you're going to show up and you're going to be on the ragtag team, and there's going to be this team where they're like been working out all year and they practice 5 times a week. Like that's weak. The other one is also the practice time and gym time or field time. They should be, all that needs to be league controlled at this level, in my opinion, when you get into rec league, because this is now, it gets a little tricky. Everything gets a little heated. The temperature goes up a little bit. This is where sports parents really start to show their true colors, right? And there's the type of sports parent. It's usually dads. There's some moms I like to kind of point out. But at this level, kind of when you get into rec level, you see there's the dad who stands up the entire game. And maybe he paces a little bit, right? There's the dad who seems to only yell at the ref like he's the best ref in the gym, that dad. And constantly, no matter what the sport is, he's on the ref. He's, and then there's the dad who just like thinks he's the coach, and is talking to all the players, on the team, or maybe even the coach. Hey, do that, blah blah blah. Maybe he was played in high school or something, and he was he's trying to relive that. Those are kind of the 3 main type of annoying dads. And there's the dads that I was always just kind of the quiet dad, sit back. I'm like, I can't impact this game from the stands. I have nothing to do here. And if my kid's any good, they're not paying attention to me anyway. They shouldn't be. So I don't talk to my kids when they're out on the fields at this point. Just out there to have fun and cheer them on and that sort of stuff. Moms, I think they're pretty similar. I think in my experience, I've seen some moms just get a little bit more intense, kind of in rec league, turn it up a little bit. But rec league is kind of where you find out, where you start to see, hey, there could be something here with my kid. Or the other side of this is, maybe you don't have the sports thing. Maybe it's not there for you. And as someone who's helped kids get to college to play their sport, we're always looking kind of for 3 things. There's genetics, opportunity, and mindset. The genetics, if you have athletic parents, there's a good chance physically athletic parents, they're gifted, they're tall, they're lean, all the traits that matter for whatever your sport is. If you have that, great. If you have the opportunity, meaning your parents can expose you to sports and have the resources to put you in them. And then there's the mindset. And that's kind of what you're looking for here is, if where's your kid's mindset? You said, do they like to be in the grind? Do they like the work? Is practice as fun as games, right? Are they as motivated to get in the car and get to practice as games? Is kind of what I'm looking for. I think that's the real signal to a kid who you need to start going, okay, maybe there's something here, because this is where you're making the decision. Am I going to push them a little bit, or am I going to back off? And I think it's really, do they like the work? Are they practicing on their own without you telling them? Are they excited to go to practice? Forget games. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And you're starting to get into this space now. What's that look like these days?
Yeah, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit with that football thing, but my boys started in first grade. So they went from like little Cubbies up to the rec league with the football league that was in our neighborhood. It was like Pee Wee League.
Yeah.
I think you totally were nailed it and danced all over it with talking about this recognition of the pushing and the taking a step back. And for me, that's been one of the biggest learnings in this. And it's hard because I want to push them for their sake, and it's hard to know if they really want or need to be pushed. And sometimes I think it's tricky because, I think on one hand I could run the risk of hurting our relationship and kind of messing them up, and I can see how I've done that and learned through that, and I'm still learning. But like when they get in the car after the game, what's that car ride like? And I look at times when I was like, okay, when that ball came to you, what did you do wrong? Or next time, drop your butt down, keep your chest up, and keep your eyes on it. And it's like, after a while, it's like that. It's not it's hurting, as opposed to, I was thinking, okay, now's a good time to really tweak. Take this to the next level, recognizing in that grind how we can, get better in this. And so, along the way in that, my two oldest sons went through the rec league into like that next competitive level. But my daughter and my youngest son, I think I kind of made this switch where at about this age, what you were describing, sitting back and just recognizing I don't have the control over this outcome of this game. Yeah. Like, I would say I went from being like dad trying to make my kids something mode to almost like grandpa. Like, and I would say for me, the sport that really flipped that switch for me was baseball. And I'm not a baseball guy. Like, I never in the garage when we go out to the, cul-de-sac was really reaching for the bat as much. I was grabbing the basketball. I was grabbing the football and the soccer ball before we would, and the frisbee before we would even reach for a bat. I didn't even know if we had any. I had a Jose Canseco glove, from my childhood that was in the garage. So being out there, it's been a really cool sport, unexpectedly. And I always expected it to just be really long, really boring. And there are elements of that. But that community piece with the other parents has been really cool. But I feel pretty removed from it, where I just sit back and I enjoy it. I enjoy being out there, and I try to not talk about it when we get in the car, unless they're talking about it. But I'm usually trying to it's the first sport where I haven't been a coach, where I haven't been like all up in all the players' faces and talking to my kid about, because I don't feel like I have earned the knowledge or the experience to be able to the nuances at this level. I can't tell my son, okay, you should have thrown it to third base there instead of second because you weren't backing up the guy. Like, I don't know when to run, when not to run, like these little nuances in the sport. I don't know. So it's been cool to let the coaches coach. And it's been cool to see like those voices in my kids' lives, because I feel like in that switch, the big switch for me has been, it might sound cheesy, but less focused on performance and more focused on, I guess you could say, position, and position more just being my kid. Like, I'm proud of you because you're my kid and I love you, instead of, man, I'm proud of you because you made the hit. Like I told you to, just like we talked about, and it's been I think it's helped me enjoy the game and I feel like it's made it a little more pure. And
Yeah.
and then I recognize it in the other parents, and I can see myself for how I was, and I'm like, man, I don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, my kids aren't going to go to that professional level unless by some miracle, and they really dig in and turn their whole lives over to it. So for me, like, I'm trying to lean in on, for them, you can take this as far as you can. And there might be a point where at one of these levels, from, cubby to, to the rec league, to the competitive, to like those next levels, you got to just, put everything you have into it. And along the way, the sport is going to test you or exceed you. And when you start getting tested or it starts exceeding, that's where what you lack in that physical ability, you got to make up for by the training and grinding. And like, if you don't love that and you don't want to do that, then, put your time and effort into discovering something within you that you want to do that with, whether that be art or music, or, if you don't play sports, you got to do something. Like to learn more about yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in rec league is where it starts to get harder to be a parent, and it's one of the hardest spaces to coach as well, because parents, the diversity of the intent of parents and athletes when you get into rec league is challenging, because as a coach, you have to find this balance between, we want to kind of succeed. It'd be nice to win, right? Yeah. Winning feels good. But I also need to make sure all my kids play about equally, right? And this is also the point where the better kids are starting to really stand out, and the kids that are terrible are really starting to stand out.
Yeah.
And so you have to balance this problem. And that's always the pressure. Like, I coached my son's basketball team in rec league level a couple times. And it's like, we're up 4, but I have to cycle some kids in, and you start to rotate your kids in ways to buffer the weakness and all sorts of things, and then you try to put your best kids out there so they can give some opportunities. It's just really challenging. And I think only one time I had a weird interaction with a parent where they were like, I think it was a dad who maybe played basketball in high school and had just some weird input on, like, hey, we're really missing an opportunity on the jump ball to start the game. Like, we should. I was like, bro, these kids we have one baseline out of bounds, like one play. We're only going to learn one, and we're struggling to do that. And you want to do, you want to start running actions on the jump? Like, no, man. And you just smile and, okay, yeah, cool, good thoughts, whatever, yeah, awesome. And so, rec league is challenging because, everyone's invited. The good kids want to play well, and the bad kids want to have a good time. And it's one of those things where maybe nobody's told you this, you're learning, or that this might not be for you as a parent and as an athlete. So rec league, really cool. And I think it's a great time to try out other sports for kids and those sorts of things. But moving from that into a more competitive level. So depending on where you're on the country, what sport you're on, this can be, sometimes they call it select or something like that, where it's a higher level, often usually costs more to play. And you're usually hopefully you're just playing locally, or, within your state or within your metro area. You shouldn't be traveling at this point with competitive. And the other kind of layers of this are, if you're in a state where they have middle school sports like you have in Texas, and in high school sports as well. I kind of lump all those together. And this is where, when it comes down to it, a lot less kids are here. We've kind of weeded out the kids who just aren't athletes anymore, or aren't going to be good at a particular sport that you're involved with. And I think that's important. So it's a time to really grow. What's that look like now? So you have kids in this space now. You got kids in high school now, middle school, and they're playing at competitive levels. What's that look like?
Yeah. So our 2 oldest sons went through a select baseball, and then my daughter went through select basketball and a select volleyball, and my youngest son's not there yet.
Right.
What I feel like at this point, we start stepping over this line where real things start getting tested. First of all, the liability is just higher, like, because everybody's going harder and faster, and they're getting to be a size where, mass times speed, velocity, whatever the formula is with physics, where, that impact is intense, and people get hurt.
In football, are they putting the kids together, by weight class? Well, I guess in middle school it's just your grade. But
well, the boys did a Pee Wee league, but then they did like a local. So I wouldn't quite put it select, but it was competitive, full contact, all
right.
And they would position you before the season. They would weigh you, and they needed to see birth certificates. You couldn't be the 17-year-old playing with the 13-year-olds, but I think this is where things start getting tested, because you're going to get a coach, and that coach is going to yell, and it's going to yell. He's going to yell at your kid, and that's going to trigger things within your kid, and that's going to trigger things within you. And so I think with that, it's going to reveal all kinds of things. And to me, I think being cognizant of watching your kids and how they react to that can serve for some just really good conversation,
right?
Because of the things that I see the value of sports being, of what that prepares you for and what that gives you off the field or off the court, or, the things in the world around you. So like, you're not trying to make an excuse for just getting yelled at, but there's that fine line of like, well, you're going to have a boss and they're going to expect things of you. And how are you going to respond to that? And in that, the thing that complicates things is I feel like you're also stepping over that line where it's shifting from, like, as a kid in these Pee Wee leagues and in these, Cubby leagues, the culture of it is just, the moms and the dads fun, it's the uniform. Let's get all the pictures, and, we're all going to order the shirt.
The banner with the team name, all the kids' pictures on it.
But see, I think this is where there's this fork in the road for me, what I've observed, where there's an opportunity there to continue a culture that's awesome.
Yeah.
That you shift away from, where it becomes about the performance and the player that shows the ability, and what that then sets the course for moving forward.
Right.
So, like, that's been a challenge heading into the phase after this around, I want my kids to value teamwork. I want them to recognize that, they're as strong as their weakest link, that we win together, we lose together, we win as a team, lose as a team, that how you respond to that adversity and seeing it in others in the way that you encourage them, lift them up, like that kind of leadership is what I want to see. But that the environment for these things then becomes around, celebrating and enabling the player that's so good to get the playing time, to get the ball, because it shifts from that participation to winning, and it's winning at all costs. And I feel like it comes at the expense of maybe the culture that's within the team that I want more of, because I want my kids in that environment more of, but you begin to lose that.
Yeah, there's definitely a shift from rec league to competitive leagues, because that, winning matters now. Right. And I don't have to, as a coach, we don't play kids equally. I think John Wooden said, I don't treat my players equally. I treat them fairly, which is something that's always resonated with me. Like, we are not equal. And I think that's the challenge, to shift from everyone gets a chance to, I need you to focus on a very specific aspect if you're not like the go-to. So in baseball, teaching the kids that I am winning, I'm helping my team win when I steal a base or field a ground ball. I'm not here, I don't have to get a hit to win. I don't have to catch a pass to win. I don't have to make baskets to win. I have to do things in practice that help us win. I have to do things in the game that are apart from that might not show up on the scoreboard, parents might not cheer for, and you have to like that, contributing everywhere in your role.
Right.
And that's tough. Have your kids are your kids going through that right now, understanding their role? And
we're there now. That's where it's like, you got to develop that, and within that role, And that's where I think you can sharpen these things and or lose it. It's kind of like a deal breaker potentially.
Yeah.
Where, if you don't receive that criticism, or really the coaching, you take it as criticism or judgment versus, hey, I'm in your face because I want you to get better at your role, then it can push you away. And I think that the coaches actually have a door that's open with influence that's unique to sports, that's different than everything else.
Yeah.
Where that door gets open and you carry a level of influence. And the thing that sucks is I see coaches, and I can't control it, and it's just my own perspective. I see them waste that influence.
Yeah.
And it's just got to be hard because most coaches are volunteer still kind of at this level.
Yeah.
Unless, depending on the league, they might get a little kickback somehow. And so, and in the select leagues, they're milling through these kids where they're not really developing much of a relationship. And so, it makes me a little sad because it's like, man, you kind of just crushed their desire to get back out there. Like
this is a challenge.
I've seen that. I experienced that. I would say my oldest son went through playing, baseball and came out the other side and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I could see how it was because of wasted influence that was, or not the recognition of him for who he is.
Yeah.
Versus his performance. And that's a tough line. That's a tough line to walk. And I don't expect every coach to know that. And I mean, you probably can't, just such a short timeline. But again, that door's open. Like, I think a player is willing to kind of give you a lot more than they would in other spaces.
Yeah.
And, there's chemistry, you can, just based on certain personality types, it could be that oil and water, or it could really mix really well. And I've seen it go the other way, where I've seen a coach recognize something in my kid. And that is an awesome thing. And it's driven them toward the sport more than I ever could as a parent. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. No, I think that's huge. It's tough. You don't get to choose the coach generally at this level. And I think this opens up an issue with having, before we get into the next level of travel sports, and maybe my kids might have the ability to play in college. This opens up one of the issues with the American pipeline of sports from high school to college, that the rest of the world, specifically Europe, they have a better setup, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So a big reason we Americans aren't good at soccer. It's not that we're not good. It's just that Europe and rest of the world has a better development system. Soccer is very, very unique. So if you ever get the chance to go to signing day at your kid's high school, it'll be this November. It'll be the main signing day. So all your seniors are going to sign to where they're going to play. If there's soccer players there, and especially if they're going to be playing Division I soccer, the coach that introduces them, because the coach will usually introduce them, and they'll have the table there with the flag from the school they're signing for. The coach will be the track coach or the wrestling coach or the volleyball coach, because the kid didn't play soccer at high school. They only played in club. And so they never really played for anything of meaning. They just did workouts and skills and played tournaments that nobody went to watch. Nobody cared about. It was just this thing. Where in Europe, with all sports, which is why you're seeing in the NBA, Europeans are starting to take over. The number one draft pick last 2 years were Europeans. Their development is way better. The problem with American sports development of athletes is, if you don't show elite promise by about 15 years old, the system gives up on you. So when you get into these, you start to play at competitive levels, there's this pressure, because you're probably starting to do this around 12 years old. So there's like this 2, 3, 4-year window, maybe, where if you don't show that you're elite, the system gives up on you. Where in Europe, they'll develop you until you're 23. So this is why soccer, again, I'll bring it up. If you look at the best Division I soccer teams in the United States last few years, or last 10 years, their rosters are made up of almost entirely 23 and up European student athletes. Because once they age out, they can't be pro anymore. They're not going to be a pro. They played amateur till they're 23. They're done. Now they're going to go extend their career in college in America. And so what happens? So if you're a 9-year-old and you're Luka Doncic and you're like you're a phenom at basketball, you're going to play with 12, 13, 14-year-olds.
Mhm.
And if you're not good, you're going to play with people that are at your level, whatever your sport is, not your age, which is the problem with America. We put athletes together mostly by age, and kids develop at different rates. And so it's a challenge to go from that competitive
Mhm.
level to the next level, because like what if you're a late bloomer? You're not going to show that promise till you're 17, which was kind of my case. I didn't even play basketball till I was a junior in high school, but I was fortunate enough to have the right people around me to get me to college, and I ended up playing in college. But that's just luck. So yeah, no, the competitive is how's it being a parent? Going to the games, like, have you played school games yet?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we my oldest is a sophomore in high school, got a freshman, got a seventh grade. My daughter's in seventh grade, so she's just now getting into this year. She made the volleyball team, and she's on the A team, and so she's on the highest level of competition in her school. And so, cool. My boys did the same thing. They played on their respective A teams. My second son there was a moment where he got put on the B team, and this is where, for me, I'm about, at this kind of this stopping point, because we're, freshman, sophomore in the process. And so I would say for my older boys, the thing that I'm just trying to figure out is this identity thing and their value, their sense of self-worth being tied to their ability. And that's been hard. And also, it's cool to see the wins there for them when they work hard and they achieve that. It's just hard as a parent to be the dad that's like, see, this is how it works in the world. Like when you do well, then you grow and naturally you get promoted or you get rewarded. Yeah. But it's in the socialization process with their peers, it's like they're in this metaphorical game of King of the Hill. In this battle to see who's the best and who's the coolest. Like the person who's the best is the coolest. So we're always talking about who's the best,
especially with boys.
And so, that's been a part, again, I'm trying to figure out, because, my oldest son made a decision this fall. And for him, it was a big decision because he decided not to play football for the high school. He played his freshman year and he made the JV team, and he put a lot into it, because at this level, it dominates your life. And he was getting up at 6 a.m., doing a morning practice.
It dominates your life, especially in Texas.
Yes, football in Texas. Yeah. And so he'd get up at 6, go to a practice. Then they would have an athletic period. They would continue into their school day. They would go through the school day. Then they would go back out to the field, and they would practice till 6:30. So he was leaving the house at 5:45 a.m. and walking in the door at 6:45 p.m. exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, every day. And so this, as a dad, I could see this kind of burning this space in his life that was this slow burn that made me concerned for his well-being mentally and emotionally, where I'm like, oh man, like I don't really know I'm in uncharted territory as a dad here. Like, do I push him because this is life and this is what it takes to be a man, because you're gonna be getting burned every day? Or it's like, hey, hold on a second, is this actually putting a wear and tear on his mental health and just beginning to shape an area in his life with his identity that he's going to have to go back on and have to like do the work in his life to either heal from or grow from. And so he made this decision not to play this year. And so for me as a dad, I had coached his team. I brought him through all the sports, and like I could tell he was dreading having this conversation with me. And it made me internally like a little sad, because I'm like, I had told him, like, dude, if you ever make that decision that you don't want to play ever again, like, I'm going to love you just the same. And I think that maybe deep down inside, he didn't believe that, because he had a hard time coming to me. But I think it was because of the investment by him. And
Yeah.
so anyways, so we're having that conversation. And so he's like, I'm not enjoying the locker room and like the way that we talk to each other. Like if you drop the pass or miss the tackle, well, then you suck.
Yeah.
As opposed to like what you were describing on this club level, like this culture maybe that exists to recognize those as the opportunities versus the failures.
Yeah.
It was just kind of just this cutthroat space where I said to him, okay, well, so then what is it then like that you want to do? Because a big part of this is who you are because you've invested it. But unless you are a coach or a trainer or you open an athletic facility or go pro, which, is such a, might as well start buying scratch off lottery tickets. That, your identity doesn't lie in sports. You're not going to move on to do things in sports unless, you have kids and you do it that way. But let's start discovering who these other spaces of who you are. I want you to figure that out for yourself, but you got to step into that with a level of curiosity, but you got to also be willing to grind in that. And the key is enjoying that process. If you enjoy the process of that, let's find some balance here. Yeah. So what I have noticed is like the light is kind of going from being dim to kind of, it's getting brighter, because it's like, okay, now now it's like he just went and got a job. He just got his first job.
Nice.
And so he's working because he can't. He's not at practice. He's not out of the house 13 hours a day, 5 days a week, and not including weekends, football games, and, dinners and breakfasts with the team and all the other extracurricular around that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome to hear. I mean, to find, a kid, there's going to be a moment for most athletes where they're done with the game. That may be after Cubbies, maybe after rec league, and maybe after a little bit of high school, or maybe their senior year was when they're done with their game at an organized competitive level. And so I kind of wanted to talk on that elite level. People call it travel sports or AAU, depending on the sport. There's a lot of similarities there, but I want to speak to that for having been in that world and experienced it. To give some parents some advice there. And the first one is, when should we decide or when should we commit to travel sports? When should we be getting on planes and traveling and hotels and playing at that level? And I would say, if your kid has always been the best player on their team up until middle school and through middle school, so 8th grade, summer after 8th grade is the first time anyone should consider, I think, playing travel sports. There's no point before that. College scouting services and college coaches are not coming to your events, and most of them, they're not coming to those events. You can actually go to the NCAA recruiting calendar and see what weekends they're actually allowed to be there, and it's mostly not there. So you shouldn't even consider this until, I believe, summer after 8th grade, and at that, it's because your kid is one of the best in your city at the sport. And then at that point, it comes down to picking a program to go with. And it matters a lot. And I say that because this should be for kids that are looking to play beyond high school. That's what it's designed for. The events, the tournaments are designed. They're really not about competitive. You're not being competitive and, playing for something. You play for your school, you play for something. People come out and watch the games. The local paper reports on them. This happens in silence in a little gym, and this is work. This is business. You want to win, don't get me wrong, but this is business. This is about showcasing talent and getting prepared for that next level so best kids can get some time playing against other best kids. That's the point of it. So I wouldn't even consider it in most sports until summer after 8th grade, when you're about to go into your freshman year. Very few outliers should be even considering this before that. And then what team to play for is pretty simple. Anybody should be able to just Google NCAA recruiting calendar, look at your sport, And on there, you're going to see what's called evaluation periods. For most sports, college coaches are allowed to come to your school games, but they don't go there to find athletes. They go to the events in the off season to find those athletes. So you look for those dates, and you look for a club that is playing at events on those dates that matter, and they're not staying. So if you're in a smaller town and the club you're looking at on their calendar has an event they're going to during the evaluation period that's still in your small town, wrong club. You're just paying a premium to play on a quote unquote travel team, but you're not doing what travel team is built for, which is to take these athletes to a space where all thousands of other athletes are, so the recruiting services and coaches can see them and start the recruiting process. That's the purpose of this. There's always going to be those parents who are like, yeah, I'm going to push my kid into this, and they're going to play, and the clubs are happy to take your money. They're happy to do it. They need the money. But it's not going to serve the purpose. You're better off just playing in continue to play competitive local regional team. You're going to have more fun. The competition is going to be more in line with what your kid is ready for, what they're prepared for. Until they show that promise of really loving the work, really loving the grind, hating losing, like all these things, they got to have this attitude, this mindset, plus the genetics, plus the opportunity. If all three of those collide, consider travel sports. Otherwise, you're just fodder, and you're just paying the bills for other kids to be there. And at that point, the parenting is way different. Most of the parents know, okay, this isn't about winning or losing the game, although it's nice. It's about my kid working on their game, getting better, playing against the best. So it's nice as a parent. I find it really relaxing because everyone knows why we're here. This is business. It rec league gets a little unclear, even in middle school and high school. It's a little unclear what, everyone has a different purpose for being here. But at this high level, if you're doing it right, you're just there to watch, cheer a little bit, hang out, and just support your kid as they go through this. So travel ball, I would say it is. People say it's not for everyone. It's for very few, is what I would say. So consider staying local, playing on a competitive team locally in your sports off season, and focus on playing for your school if that sport is offered in your school. No need to travel. You'll know when it's time. But don't burn your money, don't burn your time, don't burn your kid out on travel sports if it's not for them. So one of my kids played at that level. And one of my kids, when it was time to go beyond competitive middle school and high school, just wasn't there. It wasn't for him. And that was fine. The opportunity was there, and he had a good time playing until he was through his junior year in high school, playing basketball. And then, my daughter's playing basketball in college. So it's different for every kid, but it's super rare to need to play that level because it's expensive. If you can see it as a down payment on a college education because your kid's going to get a scholarship, it's worth it. And that's how we saw it. And that's what it ended up being. But travel sports is for very few people.
Yeah,
Thoughts? Because you're coming, you're going to be making that decision potentially in the next year or so.
Yeah. And for me, I'm trying to, maybe my mindset I could learn, but my mindset is, when that level of competition through the school begins to exceed their ability to keep up, then for me as a dad, if I see them pushing on their own to dig into that, then I'm going to come alongside them and help push them as carefully and lovingly as I can. Yeah. And if they then get, kind of get back up to it, then it's like, okay, well, let's start exploring what the potential is. Now, I would say my kids don't have the best genetics. My daughter, she's kind of an exception to the rule, and we'll see. Now, it's been interesting being in a smaller town, watching her just really shine. She's tall, she's athletic, she's very competitive, and she's coordinated. And so for me, I'm just wondering, like, coaches in this middle school coming up to me, looking for me, talking to me about her. And so those are signals of like, okay, well, they see it, and I got to be watching. So when I get to that point, when she either starts getting burned out and or expresses this and she is currently like, I want to keep doing this. I love this. Then we'll press in and see. So that's good advice.
Yeah. No, a good signal. The external signals are great. So if your kid's in middle school dominating and the high school coaches are talking to you, of the high school that they're feeding to, that's a pretty good signal that there's potential here. The other one is the right teams are reaching out to you. And so in the case of my daughter, the teams were calling us. They're basically they want to recruit the best. And so that they're calling you, that's a big signal, obviously. So if nobody's calling, nobody's talking to you, it's kind of like, they always say, if you're beautiful, people are going to tell you, but if you're ugly, you got to figure that out for yourself. And so it's a challenging time to go from, the competitive middle school, high school into travel elite level sports. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is it's a big sacrifice if you're doing it right. Because now you go from you're gone pretty much every weekend for a few months out of the year. Your kids miss out on a lot of the normal high school experience stuff, like going to the dance, those sorts of things. They're just not happening. Your kid won't get to go experience skiing or some of those kind of things because it's just too dangerous, because at this point you've invested so much, there's a lot of risk there. You got to think about what you're giving up if you're going to go to this level. This is going to become your thing, and there's a good chance your kid won't be able to, at this point you're saying, I'm not playing any other sport for the most part. I am focusing on volleyball. I am only doing basketball. I'm only doing soccer for the most part. You can play at your school, but so you got to kind of run those numbers and see if it's worth it. And I really caution people, you should be pulled into travel sports. You shouldn't be pushing into it.
And I think I'm falling on the side of knowing that, man, those means, like literal financial means, are not there. So like, and then also just trying to be self-aware of myself, but also my kids, to say, okay, this is we got to lean in on the fun side of this, because that's the greater value. And I know that might, man, I might get pushed back from a lot of people on that. But I care more about my relationship with my kids and my kids' well-being and who they're becoming than trying to force them or put them in these environments that's going to accelerate these things that more than likely just aren't going to be there. So I'm just on that side of, man, let's enjoy the experience the most we can. Let's learn as much as we can from the challenges that come from it, because it is a gift that comes on the other side of this, and in quote unquote the real world, that prepares them to try to recognize those things. But then at the end of the day, when we start bumping up against some of like the well-being, the mental health pieces of it, then I'm like, okay, well, we need to take a long, hard look at this, and maybe we're out, or let's take a season off. We may never get back on that train again, but from my perspective, I feel like it's for the better. Yeah.
No, that's good. Your kid's health is most important. So movie recommendation as we wrap up. Have you seen King Richard?
I have not.
It's the story of Venus and Serena Williams, the greatest tennis players, full stop, male or female, greatest tennis players ever. And her
I saw
dad,
the trailer.
Their dads. Watch it. I was surprised. Okay. I ignored that movie because, quite frankly, like Will Smith, up until I saw that, I would say Will Smith hasn't made a good movie since that Gene Hackman one where they're what's that game? Is it Enemy of the State?
Enemy of the State. Yeah.
I don't think he's made a good movie since then. He's just kind of, just plays kind of okay movies. Like they're good, they're okay. Like he hasn't made a great movie since then. And that movie was really well done, and now has become one of my favorite sports movies.
Sweet.
King Richard is a great sports movie. It was touching. There's things I think he did wrong, but there's things he did right. However true the movie actually ends up being, but obviously the results are there. Two greatest tennis players ever.
Is it streaming on the Netflix or something? Where do you find it?
I caught it on the streaming service. Yeah, it might be on the Cock.
Okay.
Might be on the Peacock.
Yeah.
Check out King Richard. One of my other favorite sports movies that's low key a sports movie, and it's not for this is if your kid is elite, is Whiplash
Oh, the drumming movie.
Whiplash.
Yeah.
Whiplash is a covert sports movie.
Mm.
And it really comes down to, there's this speech and it's very polarizing. You're going to be like, this is the worst way to raise an athlete, or this is the best way to raise the best athletes. And it's there's truth and falsehoods in both of it. But the movie comes down to this line, not to give it away, but he says, as a coach, air quotes, coach of an athlete, the two worst words ever are good job. Because he's talking about elite and you can't settle. And so it's not for everybody, but an interesting movie to say, are you there? Is that the kind of conversation your kid can handle? Then maybe they are elite. If that makes you sick to your stomach to even think of that, then they're not ready for that level, because it is hard. It is grueling to be at these high levels. So don't think lightly about it. But yeah, 2 movies worth watching, John. King Richard, Whiplash. Check them out.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Final
it.
thoughts?
Man, yeah, go out there and go be present as a parent and try to enjoy the sports, especially when they're young, man, and buckle up, because it's a wild ride.
That's awesome. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next time.
Big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big boy, done.